Okay. Hello and welcome everyone from around the world, whoever is connecting with us from across Europe, from around the world. This is a conference entitled From Gothenburg to Porto. This is on the eve of the Social Summit here in Porto, Portugal. This is sponsored by the Group of Socialists and Democrats as well as the Party of European Socialists, and it is putting this action plan to action. There is an action plan for the Social Summit. What will we see in the Porto Declaration? How much of the S&D Declaration on Porto, how much of that can be in that final Porto Declaration that the 27 leaders of the European Union are going to be talking about tomorrow? That is why it's important for us. We're going to be talking to prime ministers, all kinds of speakers, from prime ministers to commissioners to mayors to people on the ground in the middle of this COVID crisis. How are we going to get Europe back from this COVID crisis, build back better? And how many of those things in this declaration will actually be targets with teeth? That's also a big question we got to deal with. So joining us on this first panel are, from my left to right, Luisa Salguero, Mayor of Matosinhos. This is the area where the port is. Mayor, welcome to you. Also, there is, of course, Irache Garcia Perez. You are president of the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. Sergei Stanishev, you are president of the Party of European Socialists, PES, and an S&D group member as well. And we have Commissioner from the European Commissioner, Commissioner Nicholas Schmidt, European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. Welcome to all of you. I might give a couple of tech tips for all of those watching. Keep in mind the hashtag EU Social Summit 21, hashtag EU, hashtag social rights. Those two hashtags, if you hear a good soundbite, please cast it wider. Let's hear from you. Let's hear from you. And let's keep in mind, well, also we have interpretation, lots of interpretation in English, French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. So you can listen in all those different languages. And the agenda today, we have these opening remarks with this first panel. Then we have a town hall with people actually on the ground who are working to bring us back from that COVID crisis. We have a panel on a fair recovery. And then we have keynote speeches and closing remarks. A very high-level panel there with calls to action on this eve of the Porto Summit. Let us begin with a host of this event, Mayor Salguero.
Hello.
Welcome. Bom dia.
Welcome to you. I wish you all the best. Welcome to Matosinhos. It's an honor and a pleasure for us to receive all the socialist family here. It's a pleasure. I hope you enjoy. We choose a nice place to receive you. It's a beautiful sunny day.
We have great weather here today.
It's a nice day to work on social rights of all European people. So I wish you to say hello to Irache Garcia Perez, Sergei Stanishev, and Nicholas Schmidt. As I said, it's an honor for us. And if you don't mind, I will talk in Portuguese. Gostaria de vos dar as boas-vindas a todos. I hope there's a translation for you.
Yes, there's translation. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Gostaria de vos dizer o gosto que temos para estar aqui convosco hoje. Escolhemos este espaço simbólico. Estamos no terminal de cruzeiros de Matosinhos, onde é possível daqui avistar o porto de pesca. Nós que somos o segundo maior porto de pesca do país, mas também sediar aqui o Centro de Investigação das Ciências do Mar. Representa, portanto, a tradição e a inovação. Temos tido a preocupação de construir uma sociedade inclusiva e, particularmente, nestes tempos de pandemia que vivemos, em que, por exemplo, conseguimos construir uma unidade de cuidados intensivos de raiz, desde que a concebemos até inaugurarmos em 30 dias. Construímos, realizamos, certificamos e distribuímos máscaras por toda a população e temos tido sempre esta preocupação de construir um Matosinhos moderno, mas um Matosinhos inclusivo também. É por isso uma honra para nós receber-vos aqui e perceber que a partir de Matosinhos, e esperamos também podermos inspirar com esta forma de fazer, acolher este grande encontro europeu de discussão do pilar social, e esperamos que nós possamos aprender com o trabalho que aqui vão realizar, mas sobretudo que o exemplo de Matosinhos, o trabalho de inclusão que temos vindo a fazer, sirva também para aquilo que aqui vai acontecer. Não poderiam ter escolhido localização melhor. Nós estamos habituados a um vento do norte que sopra muito forte e estamos certos que esse vento do norte nos ajudará também a comunicar. Desejo a todos muito bom trabalho e é sempre um gosto receber a família socialista em Matosinhos. Bom trabalho para todas e para todos.
Muito obrigado, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you. We hope the winds of change will blow in the right direction tomorrow. And Irache, let's get your opening comments. I think this is a very important moment. This is, for many, a very crucial moment. Tomorrow, what is going to happen. Let's set the stage and send out a strong voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Obrigada, alcaldesa. Queridos amigos y amigas, en primer lugar quiero deciros que estoy muy feliz de estar hoy aquí en Matosinhos y en Porto. Me alegra mucho que la primera reunión de la familia socialista europea desde que estalló la pandemia del COVID sea aquí, en Portugal. Porto, una ciudad abierta, cuna de poetas y escultores, lideró en el siglo XIX la lucha por una democracia constitucional y por los derechos civiles. Y gracias al primer ministro Antonio Costa, el nombre de Porto quedará a partir de mañana asociado a la Europa social, a esa Europa solidaria, justa, esa Europa de los derechos sociales, que nos reclaman 9 de cada 10 europeos y europeas. Aquí, en Porto, iniciamos el giro hacia el crecimiento no solo económico, sino también social, que es importante si logra mejorar la vida de las personas. Ya está bien de hacernos creer que las personas deben ser las que se sacrifiquen para mejorar la economía. Y en ningún lugar mejor que Portugal para demostrar que esto es posible. Todos y todas recordamos cómo se gestionó la crisis financiera del 2008. Los agoreros de la austeridad nos querían hacer creer que esa era la única forma. ¿Os acordáis? Apretarse el cinturón, hacer sacrificios hasta que pase la tormenta, pero los sacrificios siempre se piden a los mismos. Y mientras unos se apretaban el cinturón, otros se hacían de oro. Los ricos se hicieron más ricos y los pobres más pobres. Y la clase media y la clase trabajadora vio cómo empeoraba su nivel de vida. Hasta que en 2015 llegó el gobierno progresista de Antonio Costa, que después de la asfixia de la troika devolvió el oxígeno a la gente, con una política humana, una política social y al mismo tiempo responsable. Fue el ejemplo que toda la familia socialdemócrata pusimos en Europa, que era posible avanzar en lo económico sin dejar a nadie atrás. Una sociedad donde no se explote a las personas, donde los repartidores de comida no se agobien por si tienen un accidente con la bici y nadie se hace responsable de sus gastos médicos ni de su sueldo mientras estén de baja. Una economía que no destroce el medio ambiente. Necesitamos ahora hablar de un modelo que lleve las oportunidades a todos los pueblos y regiones. No puede ser que las nuevas tecnologías nos esclavicen, porque el progreso técnico debe repercutir en una vida mejor para las personas. Nosotros, los socialistas, lo sabemos bien, porque nuestros partidos llevan más de un siglo luchando por los derechos sociales, desde la primera revolución industrial. Por eso, ahora toca invertir en educación, en sanidad, en derechos sociales, en personas con dependencia, en fortalecer el estado de bienestar. Y toca también luchar por la igualdad de género y acabar con la brecha salarial, que es una asignatura pendiente, porque mientras la mitad de la población estemos por detrás de la otra mitad, no podremos hablar de una Europa justa que avanza. Es cierto que en los últimos años no nos han puesto fácil sacar adelante esta agenda social y ahora la pandemia descubre una gran verdad, que solo con políticas sociales fuertes podemos afrontar una crisis como esta. Necesitamos una verdadera red para sacar a millones de europeos y europeas del riesgo de pobreza, porque no es de recibo que en Europa, en pleno siglo XXI, haya niños pasando hambre bajo el umbral de la pobreza. Y a día de hoy, 1 de cada 4 niños en la Unión Europea están en riesgo de exclusión social. Si no somos capaces de hacerlo, la Unión dejará de tener sentido. Porque ¿para qué sirve la Unión Europea si no somos capaces de mejorar la vida de la gente? Tenemos una oportunidad de oro para cambiar las cosas. La ciudadanía nos lo está pidiendo y solo nosotros, los socialdemócratas, podemos llevarlo a cabo. Desde los gobiernos nacionales, desde la Unión Europea, pero también desde los ayuntamientos, alcaldesa, desde las ONGs, desde las asociaciones. Por eso, esta cumbre social es tan importante, porque solo con la energía y el compromiso de todos y cada uno de nosotros podremos hacer posible esa transformación. Que el COVID sea un punto de inflexión y a partir de ahora recordemos la ciudad de Porto como el momento en el que recuperamos la esperanza por una Europa más justa, más solidaria y más humana.
Irache, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Let me shift over to Sergei Stanishev, President of the Party of European Socialists. You know, we're talking about the road from Gothenburg to here.
Yeah.
Gothenburg was a summit that talked about social issues, that set these sort of objectives. How does it feel now to have come this far? How far have we come? How far have we not come at this point?
Well, first of all, let me welcome all the participants in our debate, not only in our panel, but all the members of the family. And I'm especially happy that we are organizing this conference together with Irache, the leader of our group in the European Parliament, and all other stakeholders in the family. Because this event indeed is a long-awaited one for our political family. And I will give you one example. It took almost 9 years from the previous economic crisis to have a social summit back in 2007.
That's too long, too long.
Too long. And actually, we needed the initiative of a social democratic Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, to impose this agenda, as we do now have the initiative of the Portuguese presidency and the one of Antonio Costa to have a second social summit. And I remember very well the 2017 proclamation with 20 principles. It was a very important step forward. But Nicholas knows very well that from the first day, we as a family were saying, this is good, this is important, this shows the right priorities, because social issues should be in the very core, heart of European policies. But this is not enough. This is why we wrote 2 weeks before the summit of 2017 a letter to the Prime Ministers insisting of an action plan. And I'm very happy to see Nicholas here, already in his new capacity as the Commissioner of the European Union, who put on the table an action plan, finally. And we as Social Democrats are to celebrate the debate which will happen today in our family, because we were the driving force at every stage of this process, and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow with the Prime Ministers, the trade unions, the civil society, because we need to show the citizens of Europe the right priorities.
That we're putting this action plan to action.
Yes,
right?
Exactly, exactly. And look, we all went through a difficult period in the last year. COVID-19 destroyed whole sectors of economy. People are insecure about their future, and they are expecting the European Union to show that there will be no more business as usual. And this is where we are moving to. And if you look at social democracy, what it is about, it's about social equality, it's about economic protection, it's about gender equality, it's against any form of discrimination, and we need the tools. This is why I'm happy that the action plan, which was produced by Nicolas, has so many concrete tools, because people want to see that things will change, and they don't have too much patience. And it's time to act and to deliver. This is our goal, and this, I hope, will happen in the debates tomorrow and the day after tomorrow.
Sergei Stanishev, thank you very much. Thank you. Let us move to the Commissioner, Nicholas Schmidt. You do have to speak for 27 countries in a way, right? I mean, it's a bit tricky, but we are here as an S&D and PES event to talk about the objectives that the S&D and PES would like to accomplish and what we realistically could see tomorrow. How optimistic are you that some of those elements from the Socialists and Democrats' declaration, their action plan, can actually go into the EU action plan, the Porto Declaration?
Well, first, I'm really happy to be here among friends, and it is for our family really an important and great moment. And well, I'm not really speaking for 27 member states. I'm speaking for the Commission, and I'm speaking as a social democratic commissioner. So, I must say, it's a long way to Porto. It was a long way to Gothenburg. But all the important progresses which have been achieved on social Europe, they all were due to socialists. When I remember, and I have a long diplomatic career behind me, I remember when François Mitterrand took the initiative, 1989, with Jacques Delors, the Socialist Commission President, to have a Charter of Fundamental Social Rights, 1989. It was a Swedish social democratic government that pushed for bringing into the Amsterdam Treaty a chapter on employment. Can you imagine that we had built a monetary union and there was no word on employment? It was the Social Democrats who asked to anchor the employment in the treaties. And again, it was a Social Democrat, Stefan Löfven, who received us in Gothenburg and where this pillar of social rights was endorsed. Now, as you have said, now it's not just about principles, it's about concrete policies.
Yes.
And I must say, first, without a strong social democratic group in the European Parliament, we perhaps would not have got an action plan. Because it was Irache, Sergei, and all the friends in the European Parliament who asked for the action plan in the program of this Commission. And the President of the Commission asked me to work on this action plan. So without our family, we would not have perhaps an action plan. Now we have it, we have worked on it. It's, I think, a real strong, good compromise, a compromise for progress. And now we have to make sure that this action plan is implemented. It's first asked for the Commission to make good proposals. We have started. And again, we have proposed a few weeks ago a child guarantee. Who asked for the child guarantee? It's Sergei. Years ago, he was pushing for the child guarantee. The minimum wage, even if it's sometimes debated among ourselves, nevertheless, it's some fundamental demand of our political family, and Franz Timmermans in his campaign pushed very much for that. We made a proposal, now it's in the Council, it's in the Parliament, but again, it's our group in the Parliament pushing very, very strongly for that. And now it's a question also of persuasion. We know all that there are forces in Europe, among member states, who are not very much happy or not really motivated because they consider that social, that's national. That's not something Europe should deal with, which is wrong. The treaty gives the Commission, gives the European Union certain powers, certain competences in social, but especially also we cannot build a strong economic union, we cannot build an internal market and just leave the social out. This was never the case since the beginning of the European integration process. So we are here, and I thank Antonio Costa a lot for his investment. We talked about that even before I became a commissioner. Now we are here, and it is really an historic moment. Thank you.
Nicola Schmidt, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. Thank you to all of the panel. We have to try to stay on time, so this was wonderful. Thank you very much for your opening comments. This does set the tone for this, this conference. Thank you, Irace. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you also, Nicholas, and also Sergey. Thank you. So at this point, because of COVID, we have to take a little bit of a moment at the moment to clean these podiums so that we can go to the next panel. And this next panel will be, yeah. Can we go to David Sassoli now? Is that possible?
Sì, buongiorno.
Yes?
Yes, hello, good
Buongiorno,
evening.
buongiorno, Presidente. President of the European Parliament.
Grazie.
Yes, Mr. Sassoli, hello. Buongiorno.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, hello.
Per lei
am
è un momento
really happy to be
molto
coming
importante domani. Quanto importante è domani per lei questo summit?
Guardi, non vedo.
I must tell you that I can't wait to come to Porto because the initiative of the Council and Prime Minister Costa in particular is something that will enable us to keep faith to our promise, for us, for the socialist family in particular, but I believe for everybody. It is a promise that we made a year ago to our citizens when we told them that we weren't going to leave anybody behind after the crisis. And this is a promise that now requires policies. The panel just before mentioned this. We need actions, we need plans that become realities. We need to keep faith to our promise. Nobody must be left behind, and the crisis cannot hit the weakest in our society. We must enable the European Union to find its true identity again, the idea of citizenship, of equality, which is based on solidarity policies. This is the reason why the Porto initiative is extraordinarily important for us. It's important to our family because for years we have been battling to ensure that the crisis does not strengthen the few, the privileged. And this means that we have to think of everybody who takes initiative and who works and try to avoid absurd income, absurd yields that some people have by bringing more balance. The European Commission has undertaken very important actions. It has launched initiatives on tax reform. It has tried to find balance within the European budget thanks to own resources and new own resources. It has reviewed the Stability and Growth Pact, and I think that as a socialist family and a democratic family, we really need to lead on this reform. We need to fight for it. We cannot go back to old rules, the rules that created too many disparities. In the review and the reform of the Stability and Growth Pact, it is essential to focus on social objectives, on social targets, on inclusive growth, on investing in welfare, in education, in training, and in social protection systems, because these are the things that enable us to have a more resilient society. And this has to be the path we follow. We have to work and we have to undertake all efforts to find decent work for everybody. And this is a reason why the work we're doing even here within the European Parliament on minimum European wages is so important. We know that the crisis has highlighted the fragility of our social chains, and we know that the weakest links of these chains are young people and women, most specifically. These are the people who risk exclusion, and for a long time they may yet be excluded unless we carry out policies in favor of inclusion and solidarity, so as to enable them to face up to all the suffering that this crisis has created for everyone. We, of course, need, as someone said quite rightly, to work on young people, on children. We have so many, too many children who are at risk and who might not be included unless we help them. This is one of the reasons for which the child guarantee has to be one of our main battles to be carried out over the next months. I think our family has the right ideas. I believe that right now we have the strength that we need to change paradigms that before COVID already led us to be a society that was not equal. I can't wait to reach Porto tomorrow. It's a very important meeting, and I look forward to the informal council, and I really look forward to bringing the messages that the Parliament and each and every one of us have tried to bring forward over these last months. In particular, I really want to keep our promise. We really want to make sure nobody is excluded by this crisis. We believe the social pillar and the specific care that the Portuguese presidency has taken to focus for all member states and all European institutions on these issues is really essential to a future for the European Union which is of welfare and well-being for all. Thank you.
David Sassoli, President of the European Parliament. Signor Presidente, molto grazie, grazie tanto. Speriamo che vediamo questo progresso domani a questo summit. Grazie. Now we move to our next panel, and this is a very important panel because it is called the Town Hall panel. This is where we combine policy makers with people on the ground, on the front line in this COVID crisis who are working very hard to help bring us back and help bring us back better, as we all would like to do. This is going to be a hybrid panel. With us in the studio is, from my left, Agnes Jongerius, who is S&D Coordinator for the European Parliament Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. And next to her is Manuel Pizarro, the S&D member of the European Parliament's also Employment Committee. And you're also a medical doctor. You are a doctor. And to my left is Ana Mendes Godinho. Welcome, bon dia, Minister of Labor, Solidarity, and Social Security of Portugal. Nice to be in your country. It's beautiful here. Yes? Yes. And next to her is Alicia Holmes, President of the Young European Socialists, YES, and the S&D member of the European Parliament, also in the Employment Committee. Very important, Employment and Social Affairs. Now, and joining us virtually, where they're working out there on the ground, is Rafael Arabe Murillo. You are Nurse and Young Workers Representative at the General Union Workers, UGT, Spain. Then we have Marcin Wojciak, Polish worker in the logistics sector, and a migrant workers representative of the FNV trade union in the Netherlands. And also Dana Lutzendorf, chair of the Central Works Council of the University Hospital Charité in Berlin. In fact, I lived a few blocks away from that and took one of my children there to the emergency room one time. So I thank you and your team all for what you did to help us out. And you are there on the front line still. So why don't we get started here with Agnes. Agnes, let me ask you, why are we still talking about quality jobs? Quality jobs should have been a thing already established, long ago. Enough already. Let's get it done, right?
Let's get it done, indeed. And I think it's clear that the problems which has been amplified and highlighted in the COVID crisis, were there already before. So in-work poverty, people who are minding our children, who are stacking the supermarkets, who are parcel deliveries or Uber drivers, they cannot live from the income. They could not do it during the COVID crisis, but they also couldn't do it before. And I think here it's important that we indeed say this is something where Europe should be ashamed of. I think it should be the case that when you work hard trying to provide for your family, you should have a decent income. And therefore I'm happy that instead of the old proposals from the European level, lower the minimum wage, we are now talking about higher minimum wages. And I think it's high time. We are working on it in the European Parliament. Anna is working on it in the European Council. In total, we are talking about 24 million people in Europe who are going to profit from higher minimum wages. And I should say this would have been a task before the crisis, but now in the crisis with the COVID, we all know how important the jobs are, which I just mentioned. So let's get it done.
And let's talk to one of these people working out there in the field, Rafael Arabe Murillo, a nurse in Spain. Rafael, what about this idea of precariousness? You're on the front line fighting COVID, and yet you're still experiencing great precariousness at work. Can you tell us about that? You hear me okay, Rafael? Buenos días.
Hola, buenas tardes. No sé si se me oye bien.
Yes, we hear you, we see you. Tell us about that precariousness at work.
Perfecto. Bueno, en primer lugar, dar las gracias por esta oportunidad de participar. Me parece importante en este punto y un poco lo que se ha venido hablando en la anterior ponencia, ¿no? La importancia de valorar positivamente lo que es o lo que debe ser el pilar social europeo, ¿no? También se ha hablado, ¿no?, del tema de la pandemia y cómo ha afectado desde mi punto de vista, desde mi experiencia como trabajador de la sanidad y además como persona joven y ciudadano europeo que trabaja en este campo, ¿no? Pues es un reto importante el ver cómo verdaderamente necesitamos que el pilar social sea un pilar fuerte, porque si no tenemos una sociedad fuerte que verdaderamente refuerce ¿cómo decir, no? Que realmente refuerce las necesidades de nuestra sociedad, el proyecto va a hacer aguas.
Y esta crisis puede decir qué hace en un día durante esta crisis, cómo es difícil para usted de trabajar.
La verdad es que las dificultades que mayormente encuentro, ¿no?, en mi día a día es el tema de la precariedad laboral a la que nos enfrentamos. Yo creo que el grueso del personal sanitario, por lo menos el grueso del personal sanitario que trabajamos en Madrid, donde hemos tenido que soportar políticas de privatización auténticamente salvajes por parte de los gobiernos de la comunidad en manos de la derecha y que por desgracia nuevamente vuelven a estar en manos de estos partidos, ¿no?, de corte totalmente neoliberal. El tema de que yo, reflexionando un poco sobre esta problemática, veía que esto del pilar social lo planteamos en Europa como para aquí hasta el 2030, ¿no? Es decir, son 10 años. Llevo 12 años trabajando desde que terminé de estudiar y todavía no tengo un contrato decente. A día de hoy todavía permanezco con contratos que van enganchando uno tras otro de 6 meses en 6 meses, 15 días, a veces incluso contratos pues de 24 horas, ¿no? Es difícil el poder realizarse laboral, socialmente y también el poder prestar un servicio de primera necesidad como es la salud y y la sanidad sin una continuidad, ya no solo la mía, ¿no? Porque no solo soy el único ejemplo. Por desgracia, yo creo que entre el 70 y el 85% de las plantillas y máxime todos aquellos que actualmente hacemos frente a la pandemia, nos encontramos ante esta situación.
Rafael, gracias. Manuel, ¿te identificas con lo que dijo Rafael?
Claro que
Em
sim.
sua experiência como médico.
Claro que sim. Eu, durante a primeira vaga da pandemia, voltei ao meu hospital, o Hospital São João, no Porto, para trabalhar como médico. Foi uma experiência muito gratificante. E o que mais me impressionou foi que, naqueles tempos de incerteza e de medo, foi a coragem e a determinação dos profissionais, em especial dos jovens profissionais. Os médicos, os enfermeiros, os outros profissionais nunca abandonaram a primeira linha. E se Portugal tem resultados muito positivos no combate à pandemia, eu acho que nós podemos agradecer, em larga medida, aos profissionais de saúde e, em grande parte, a estes jovens profissionais que mostraram e continuam a mostrar tanta dedicação. Eles mostram bem que o Serviço Nacional de Saúde Público, que é uma das grandes conquistas da nossa democracia, é uma coisa pela qual vale a pena lutar de maneira a termos todos direito à saúde de qualidade. Agora, a verdade é isso, é que também por isso nós temos hoje mais obrigação de conseguir valorizar as carreiras dos profissionais de saúde. São profissões com grande desgaste físico e grande desgaste emocional, que perturbam sempre a vida familiar. E eu acho que temos que olhar para esses profissionais com maior respeito e resolvendo problemas de integração profissional que tardam muito a ser resolvidos. Nos serviços públicos de saúde, nós temos que reforçar a autonomia e a liderança técnica dos profissionais. Esse é o nosso motivo do nosso sucesso.
So what concretely, I wish I could speak Portuguese, sorry.
It's better to speak in English.
Well, what,
It's more
okay, thank you. What concretely would you like to see tomorrow in your dream or vision in the Porto Declaration on Social Rights?
Eu gostaria de ver uma referência clara às carreiras profissionais, à liderança profissional, à valorização dos serviços públicos, nomeadamente do Serviço Nacional de Saúde. Eu estou muito contente porque o Next Generation EU, em Portugal, vai permitir um grande investimento no Serviço Nacional de Saúde. Esse investimento é muito importante nas infraestruturas e nos equipamentos, mas o maior investimento, o mais importante de todos, é o investimento nos profissionais. Nós temos que ser capazes de cuidar bem de quem queremos que cuide de nós.
Thank you, Manuel. Obrigado. Let me shift over to someone else out in the field, Marcin Wojciak. Marcin, dzień dobry, do you hear me?
Hello, dzień dobry.
There you are. Hello, hello. You're a temporary worker in the Netherlands. You're from Poland, and that happens a lot. There are a lot of people migrating from one European country to the other, right? And you work in the Netherlands over the last 3 years now. What does it mean to be a migrant worker today to you?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. It's a big honor to speak to such good ladies and gentlemen who could improve our lives. Yes, as you said, I've been here for over 3 years. It's not easy to describe it in such a quick, short time. However, to give you just indication of it, we are facing a number of problems, mostly are related with our accommodation and jobs, obviously. We have unfair dismissals, we're facing evictions, we are struggling with getting enough work to make our budgets. Also, unrealistic production norms that leads to we are too tired to perform, really. And because of that, we feel exploited. That leads me to the feeling we have by the treatment we receive of a second-class citizens.
As a migrant worker, as a migrant worker in another country, that's how you feel, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. And this summit tomorrow, what would you like to see that summit include to address those concerns about the quality of work, about minimum wage, about fair treatment?
Yes, minimum wage is one of the things we would like to be discussed. Also, we've been talking about separating double roles of work agencies, which means that they have a power over us by providing us with accommodation and jobs at the same time. What happens is, if you lose your job, you are homeless almost next day. Also, when we come over here, we expected to get enough work to do so. We really struggling with the fact that our contracts are built that way that we have 0 hours guaranteed, at least for the first month. After that, after first month, it's not even getting better, it's just slightly better, but that situation shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
So proper contracts and also health and safety at work, this is a huge issue as well.
Right. Marcin, dziękuję bardzo. I hope to come back to you. Let's shift over to Ana Mendes Godinho, which, I mean, I might mention too that many Portuguese were migrants for a long time as well, when, working in France and other parts of Europe as well. So lots of stories, I'm sure, among your family and relatives as well.
Direct family, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So in this time of economic crisis, do we need to choose between quality jobs or job creation? Why can't we have both?
Well, first of all, hello, Chris. Welcome to Porto. In this, I hope and I expect historical moment for Europe that we need so much to have this strong shake in our priorities and putting the social dimension in the basis of our European spinal cord. Answering your question, we learned from the past that it's not through austerity that we solve problems, and that we grow together and that we grow as Europe. I do think that Europe will only be Europe if people believe and trust. And this is a moment. This is the moment to guarantee that we are giving everyone the voice they need and that we are acting. The Portuguese presidency has assumed this motto, time to deliver with concrete actions, and that's what we'll have. Hopefully tomorrow, for the first time, going from Gothenburg, which was so important to have the 20 principles of Gothenburg, going from principles to action, and for the first time involving everyone. We need a clear message involving everyone to answer concrete expectations of real people. I do think Europe needs this message for real people with a message of quality jobs. Only through quality jobs we will have a Europe that will deliver trust, confidence, and that will promote social peace. There's no alternative to social peace besides quality jobs. And quality jobs are quality jobs that guarantee fair wages, good and fair working conditions, but also that guarantee competitiveness. In the world of transition, where we are discussing transition, the double digital and green transition, we need people. And that's what makes Europe different from the other continents. It's a continent based in people and their rights. We cannot treat other people in another way that we would not treat ourselves. And this pandemic showed how we must act in a different way to tackle what the pandemic showed, not only, of course, the new challenges we have, but the old problems we have in the field. Precarious work, young people who are right now desperate looking for a job, but for a decent job, a quality job, a sustainable job. We need a sustainable employment compromise, a new compromise at a European level where we create the effective conditions, of course, creating instruments, regulatory instruments, financial instruments, with conditions, of course, also to support quality jobs in the several dimensions. Again, the alternative to this is to stop social peace.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much. Let's go back out into the field and talk to Dana Lutskendorf. Dana, can you hear me over at Charité Hospital? Grüße Sie.
I can hear you, yes.
Hello. What are the challenges for hospital workers, according to you? I mean, what's it like working amid this COVID crisis among you and your colleagues?
Ja, also ich werde auf Deutsch
Ja, können Sie, das geht. Ja, ja, okay.
Okay. Dann, ja, also danke, dass ich was aus meiner Erfahrung erzählen darf, wie es jetzt ist, in der Pandemie zu arbeiten. Aber ich möchte auch kurz berichten, ich bin ja seit über 20 Jahren Intensivkrankenschwester auf einer Intensivstation und erlebe den Abbau von Personal und besonders von Pflegepersonal, die steigende Belastung, die Arbeitsbelastung aufgrund der Finanzierung und des Kostendrucks im Krankenhaus. Wir betreuen immer mehr Patienten in immer kürzerer Zeit und die Länder kommen ihren Investitionen nicht vollumfassend nach. So müssen die Krankenhäuser aus den Personalbudgets ihre notwendigen Investitionen beziehen. Und jetzt in der Pandemie kommt jetzt eben noch die Belastung obendrauf. So solche Erlebnisse, wie wir sie jetzt haben, habe ich noch nie erlebt. Ja, es ist eine außerordentliche Situation. Viele Menschen sterben. Ich arbeite auf einer Covid-19-ITS mit Schwerstkranken, also eigentlich mit den schwersten Fällen in Berlin und Region. Und das, was ich da erlebe, ist schon sehr belastend. Psychisch und physisch sehr belastend.
So, Dana,
wenn man
darf
überlegt,
ich...
dass wir über Jahre schon stark belastet sind, dann muss man sich nicht wundern, dass die Kollegen jetzt in Studien äußern, also es wurde eine Studie gemacht, dass jede 6. Pflegekraft ernstzunehmende Gedanken hat, den Beruf zu verlassen. Und
so Dana, was möchten Sie, hören Sie mich?
Ein enormes Problem.
Hören Sie mich?
Wir müssen alles daran setzen, dass wir die Kollegen halten. Und eine andere Umfrage hat ergeben, dass über 50% sich vorstellen könnten, wieder in den Beruf zurückzukehren, wenn die Bedingungen deutlich besser sind. Das heißt also, da ist eine riesen Ressource und viel zu tun.
Okay, Dana, vielen Dank. Ich möchte vielleicht zurück zu Sie kommen, aber wir müssen, sorry, we're have to try to win back a bit of time that we're behind right now. Alicia Harms, President of the Young European Socialists. What does this new crisis mean for young people's jobs? We had a webcast earlier this week with S&D talking to youth, young socialists, and they're very concerned about their future. I guess you are too.
Yes. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos y a todas y obrigada por me dar la palabra y obrigada por me convidar para participar en este evento na cidade de Porto. Contestando directamente a tu pregunta, Chris, yo creo que nos encontramos en un momento decisivo y no solamente por los desafíos que plantea la propia pandemia de la COVID a nuestras economías, a nuestros mercados laborales, a nuestro propio estado del bienestar, sino porque volvemos a correr el riesgo de perder a la generación mejor preparada otra vez. Una generación que ve una tasa de empleo mayor que en ningún otro rango de edad, que ve cada vez más difícil encontrar un trabajo de calidad, como hemos estado hablando hasta ahora, y que ve casi imposible iniciar su proyecto de vida. Una persona joven, cualificada, que no pueda incorporarse en el mercado laboral, puede perder sus capacidades, sus competencias, pero sobre todo y lo que más me preocupa es que pueda perder su fe. No solo su fe en sí mismo, sino también en el sistema. Y esto es algo que no nos podemos permitir hoy en día en la Unión Europea. Yo creo que tenemos que pensar en que esto es un desafío global, no solamente de una generación. Y si Europa aspira a liderar las transiciones verdes y digitales, la contribución de los jóvenes es fundamental para revitalizar las regiones rurales, innovar la economía, consolidar la democracia y asegurar el futuro sostenible. Yo creo que las generaciones jóvenes demandan un nuevo modelo de sociedad, un modelo que priorice la dimensión social y que ponga a las personas en el centro. No ha sido fácil, pero la Unión Europea lo ha entendido y muestra de ello son programas como el Erasmus+, el Fondo Social Europeo Plus, la Garantía Juvenil Reforzada, la nueva Garantía Infantil y los diferentes programas financieros que han salido como el Next Generation, REACT-EU o el Mecanismo de Recuperación y Resiliencia. Por tanto, yo espero que esta cumbre de Oporto sirva, si no como un punto de inflexión, como una guía para reforzar y consolidar la Europa social que nos piden los jóvenes y las jóvenes de Europa.
Muchas gracias, Alicia. I would like to actually go back to Manuel for some final comment, because I'm trying to regain time here. But I mean, from everything you've heard, as a doctor here, can you sum it up? What needs to be brought across to those 27 leaders tomorrow from what we heard during this panel?
Eu acho que o que a pandemia tornou claro é que a grande maioria dos cidadãos europeus querem muito mais envolvimento da União Europeia nas questões sociais e também nas questões da saúde. E eu espero que os líderes europeus ouçam os europeus, ouçam as pessoas, porque as doenças não têm fronteiras, como aliás a pandemia demonstrou. E a verdade é que nós seremos muito mais eficazes a gerir os recursos para melhorar a saúde se formos capazes de os gerir em conjunto, com objetivos comuns, eliminando as desigualdades. Porque esse é o outro aspecto. Esta pandemia pôs a nu que as desigualdades sociais pesam muito na saúde das pessoas. A pandemia não atingiu as pessoas todas por igual, atingiu muito mais as pessoas com mais fragilidade económica, com maior fragilidade social, e a nossa obrigação é concretizar o pilar europeu dos direitos sociais, que diz que deve haver cuidados de saúde preventivos e curativos, de qualidade, acessíveis a todas as pessoas. É avançar mesmo, como é o mote da presidência portuguesa, avançar na União Europeia da Saúde, que tem que passar do papel e constituir-se como algo de concreto. Eu devo dizer que há passos muito importantes que têm sido dados, em larga medida por iniciativa do Parlamento Europeu, o EU4Health, o Plano Europeu contra o Cancro, as novas medidas para combater os produtos tóxicos e os acidentes no mercado de trabalho, mas acho que todos temos noção de que precisamos de fazer mais e é por isso que os socialistas se reúnem nesta cimeira, é porque nós queremos mais saúde na União Europeia, mais saúde para todos.
Manuel, thank you very much, and thank you to all our speakers on the panel and also virtually out there in the field. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel one on how it is to work in the field and what should be done tomorrow, what should be in that Porto Declaration regarding work. So that was a very important part of this conference on the eve of the Porto Summit. Thank you very much to this panel. And let's prepare then for the next panel, which is going to be on time for a fair recovery. Should we get back to just business as usual, or should we change the situation? How should we build back better and build back in a way that employees are going to be treated fairly? Should we have a minimum wage? Should we have a child guarantee, a youth guarantee? To what extent should it be perhaps binding? Should we just have targets, or should we have targets with teeth? That is the big question as we look at those issues today. Workers, regions, countries in the EU, generations, these inequalities among all of these. How do we close the gap of these inequalities in so doing? There's not enough housing for a lot of people. The working conditions, like you just heard, are very difficult, and also that aspect of the digital transition. Many people working digitally, and there's that big issue of the right to disconnect. Should they have the right to disconnect? Do they always have to be connected round the clock, working for whomever it is and answering whoever's messages? So a lot of issues here to deal with. This COVID crisis has brought to the fore so many of these issues that perhaps were brewing for quite a while, but it's intensified all of this through through the COVID crisis. Okay, why don't we get started with our next panel? On my left, Hubertus Heil, Federal Minister of Labor and Social Affairs of Germany, grüße Sie. And Vasco Cordero, you are the first Vice President of the European Committee of Regions, COR, and member of the group of the Party of European Socialists, PES group, in the COR. Right. And I think joining us virtually, do we have Helene Fritzon? Are you there with us? Hi, Helene. You're the Group Vice President, S&D Group Vice President. Welcome. And a member of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee. We've already spoken before on other webcasts. It's great to see you again. Let's start with you about the aspirations of young people. Let's start there, because we did talk to young people earlier this week on a webcast. Their aspirations and how to meet those aspirations with this social summit.
Thank you so much, Chris, and good evening. I would have liked to be in Porto, but I am still in Sweden, and I am happy to be with you tonight, and I look forward to the debate, discussion, and also to the conference tomorrow. For me, as a social democrat, a fair recovery is a recovery that is based on unity and solidarity, and we need inclusive measures ensuring no one is left behind. And as you mentioned, Chris, I especially think about all the young people, because looking at the current situation, it is clear that getting back to business as usual is not an option. Citizens of Europe also demands something else. We can look at the young people's aspirations when it comes to the climate change. You know, in Sweden we have Greta, and she has inspired a lot of young people all over the world. And we can look at the figures from a recent Euro barometer, clearly showing that 9 in 10 Europeans consider a social Europe to be important to them, where the most pressuring issues are equal opportunities and access to the labor market, access to fair working conditions, and also access to a high quality of health. So I can see the will for change, and to achieve this, we must find new solutions for the future. We need to build the new economy, the new green economy. And to put in concrete terms, I think it's about creating a society based on social values and equality. And of course, for me, it's very important, and for our political family, it must be based on gender equality. We have a report in the European Union that shows that if we not do more than we do today, we will have the gender equality, we will have a big gap, and we don't reach a gender equality based Europe before 60 years. And I have a granddaughter, she is 7 years old, and I don't want her to wait until she is 67. So we have a hard work to do together.
Right.
And I think it's our political family that can change it.
Okay.
We need a lot of things to do together to achieve this. We must eliminate in work poverty and close the gender pay gap. We must promote job creation. We must fight social exclusion and tackling poverty, in particularly, as mentioned here before, child poverty. The European Child Guarantee is an excellent step, a good tool in this direction. And we must support children in need all over Europe. And we must ensure the social dimension of the ongoing climate change. And
Okay.
of course, again, push for gender equality.
Okay, Helen, thank you very much. I'm so sorry I've had to move quickly to the Minister, Hubertus Heil. Was ist für Sie eine faire Erholung? Was sind die Hauptprioritäten der EU, um Gleichheit und soziale Sicherheit zu gewährleisten, Gerechtigkeit und Nachhaltigkeit?
Ja, thank you very much. Die Frage ist, was lernen wir aus dieser Krise? Wir sind ja mitten noch drin. Und es gibt akut in dieser Konjunkturkrise ein paar Dinge, die uns nach wie vor beschäftigen, neben der Gesundheitskrise. Es ist der Kampf um jeden Arbeitsplatz. In meinem Land, in Deutschland, machen wir das sehr erfolgreich mit dem Instrument der Kurzarbeit, mit Short-Time Work Scheme, um Brücken zu bauen über das tiefe wirtschaftliche Tal. Und eine Lehre für Europa könnte sein, für auch andere konjunkturelle Krisen, etwas wie eine Arbeitslosenrückversicherung zu haben. Deutlich zu machen, dass wir überall in Europa dann eben nicht prozyklisch in eine Krise reinsparen, sondern Brücken bauen, um Jobs zu sichern. Übrigens auch um jeden Ausbildungsplatz zu kämpfen. Das machen wir in Europa mit der Youth Guarantee und in Deutschland mit einem Schutzschirm für Ausbildung, weil die Auszubildenden von heute die Fachkräfte von morgen sind. Das Zweite ist aber, dass wir nicht nur über Konjunkturkrisen und über die Frage dieser Lessons learned sprechen müssen, sondern wie eben beschrieben darüber, dass Corona ein Brandbeschleuniger für den Strukturwandel der Arbeitswelt ist, für Digitalisierung, dass wir das Thema Dekarbonisierung vor uns haben, auch die Demografie unserer Gesellschaften. Und da ist es notwendig, das zu schaffen, was vorhin diskutiert wurde, einen fairen Rahmen für Mindestlöhne und mehr Sozialpartnerschaft, mehr Tarifverträge, um den Wandel auch auszuhandeln, dafür zu sorgen, dass die Frontline-Worker sind, nicht nur Applaus bekommen, sondern tatsächlich faire Arbeitsbedingungen. Das Dritte ist, dass wir Möglichkeiten schaffen müssen, unsere Sozialstaaten in Europa gemeinschaftlich präventiver aufzubauen. Wir sind nicht die schlechtesten Sozialstaaten, bei allen Lücken, die wir in der Covid-Krise auch gesehen haben, jedenfalls im internationalen Vergleich. Aber wir sind zu nachsorgend. Wir geben sehr viel Geld aus, wenn das Kind schon in den Brunnen gefallen ist. Und die wichtigste Frage ist Reskilling und Upskilling. Können wir dafür sorgen, dass die Beschäftigten von heute die Arbeit von morgen machen können? Weiterbildung, Qualifizierung, das ist das, was wichtig ist. Der Traum von einer Arbeitsversicherung, die Beschäftigungsfähigkeit in den Mittelpunkt stellt, die nicht sozusagen erst Arbeitslosigkeit zulässt, sondern Menschen in Arbeit hält. Ich glaube, das sind ein paar Dinge, die wir auf den Weg bringen müssen. Das Wichtigste ist aber, dass wir anders als in anderen Krisen, und wir haben ja in Europa 3 große Herausforderungen in dem letzten Jahrzehnt gehabt, die Wirtschafts- und Finanzkrise 2008, 2009, die Frage der Flüchtlingskrise 2015. Beide Krisen haben Europa eher auseinander dividiert und wir haben mehrere Krisen der europäischen Integration erlebt, nicht zuletzt auch den Ausstieg Großbritanniens. Die spannende Frage ist, schaffen wir es aus dieser Krise solidarische Konsequenzen zu ziehen, Rahmen zu schaffen für europäische Mindestsicherungssysteme, aber auch für Mindestlöhne und für mehr Tarifbindung, und schaffen wir es, an den richtigen Stellen in Europa zu investieren, damit wir in den 20er Jahren Chancen und Schutz im Wandel stärken. Und dafür ist es wichtig, nicht nur eine europäische Säule sozialer Rechte aufzuschreiben, sondern sie konkret abzuarbeiten und umzusetzen. Das ist die Mission der Sozialdemokraten in Europa. Und dafür müssen wir zusammenstehen.
Okay, Minister, vielen Dank. I would like to go online to Andrea Orlando. Are we connected? Andrea Orlando, Italian Minister of Labor and Social Policies. Buonasera, Minister.
Buonasera.
Buonasera. Cosa intende per ripresa giusta? Quali devono essere le priorità dell'Unione Europea per assicurare uguaglianza, giustizia sociale e sostenibilità?
Tutti erano preoccupati che dopo la pandemia le cose tornassero come prima. Io credo che questo non succederà, ma non è detto che saranno migliori, perché credo che nel corso di questi mesi sono cresciute le diseguaglianze, si sono aggiunte a quelle che esistevano già. Sono persone che erano povere, sono diventate ancora più povere. Ci sono persone che erano ricche e sono diventate ancora più ricche. Le donne hanno pagato un prezzo più alto, i giovani, le piccole imprese rispetto alle grandi, i paesi più deboli rispetto a quelli più forti. E anche le grandi transizioni che noi vogliamo sono una grande opportunità, ma se non sono guidate da senso di giustizia possono produrre a loro volta ulteriori diseguaglianze. particolare quella digitale, che può cambiare profondamente il mondo del lavoro, della distribuzione, l'organizzazione della società stessa. E per questo motivo io credo ci sia l'esigenza di guidare questi processi con strumenti nuovi di cui oggi non disponiamo. Occorre un'Europa che abbia una fiscalità comune, occorre un diritto del lavoro europeo, occorre una contrattazione europea. Poi occorrono nuovi strumenti per i lavoratori, per incidere nei processi di trasformazione che si determineranno e che si stanno già determinando. Il primo strumento è quello di un accesso alle principali decisioni che riguarderanno il loro destino. Occorre rilanciare un obiettivo di una democrazia economica. E poi io credo ci sia bisogno anche di nuovi strumenti anche rispetto al passato. Credo che sarà molto utile la direttiva sul salario minimo e che sta portando avanti il compagno Smith, ma credo che in questa nuova direttiva dovranno anche essere contenuti strumenti per accedere agli algoritmi, che sono i nuovi contratti non scritti e che noi dobbiamo poter leggere per poter capire come cambieranno le condizioni del lavoro.
Allora,
Questi sono i presupposti, io credo, perché la ricostruzione sia giusta.
Allora, Ministro, per concludere, qual sarebbe un obiettivo concreto che vorrei vedere domani in questo summit? Che vorrebbe lei vedere? Mi senta?
Aspetto che il passo che è stato determinato dalla pandemia diventi irreversibile e che l'Europa sia in grado di gestire con un debito comune le grandi trasformazioni che ha di fronte, che sia in grado di intervenire nei processi di trasformazione con risorse proprie, che sia in grado di sostenere le transizioni e di far sì che siano giuste e abbia strumenti per ridurre le diseguaglianze e le distanze che si sono determinate e che esistevano prima della pandemia. E mi aspetto che questo passo sia irreversibile, che quindi l'Europa non sia più soltanto un mercato, perché se l'Europa è anche una dimensione sociale, come tutti noi vogliamo, credo, allora si compie e si rende necessario un altro passo ulteriore, che è quello della costruzione di una democrazia europea, di una Europa politica, nella quale le risorse messe in comune siano anche il presupposto di istituzioni pienamente e fortemente legittimate democraticamente. E io credo che sia un ulteriore passo possibile, ma credo che anche per questo i socialisti si debbano guardare intorno, costruire nuove alleanze e unire tutti quelli che si battono per la ricostruzione di transizioni giuste.
Okay. Ministro, grazie, molto grazie. I'd like to move, I'm falling back on time again, I'm trying to regain, but Vasco Cordero, maybe you can help me with that. First Vice President of the European Committee of Regions, COR, and COR has a consultative role in the European Union, but it is providing that sort of 3D of EU democracy, isn't it? Because it's that grassroots voice from across Europe, that Committee of the Regions, for people from across Europe. So tell us, what is a fair recovery to you?
Well, thank you, Chris, for your question, and you will allow me to answer in Portuguese.
Yes.
Em primeiro lugar, eu gostaria de dizer que a importância deste encontro do Porto não tem a ver apenas com o passado, não tem a ver apenas com o percurso que foi feito de Gothenburg até aqui. Tem a ver, sobretudo, com o futuro, porque em qualquer circunstância esta cimeira já seria importante. No momento em que se começa a pensar na recuperação face à crise de Covid-19 é ainda mais importante e essencial. E é também por isso que aqui estou, em representação não apenas do Comitê das Regiões, não apenas de um órgão da União Europeia, mas exatamente significando que as centenas de milhares de entidades locais e regionais por toda esta Europa, os políticos socialistas, progressistas dessas entidades, respondem presente a este desafio de ajudar a construir uma Europa mais social. Repare, Chris, nós já estivemos aqui, nós já estivemos perto, não exatamente, mas já estivemos perto desta situação. Aquilo que aconteceu na crise financeira é o melhor exemplo daquilo que não deve ser uma recuperação nesta crise. A ênfase tem que ser colocada num conjunto essencial de políticas que se ligam diretamente à dignidade da pessoa, que se ligam diretamente àquilo que a pessoa tem a esperar do projeto europeu e da atuação de qualquer uma das entidades que com elas se relaciona. As entidades locais e regionais significam exatamente isto. E repara, o que eu quero dizer é isto. Uma recuperação que passe por dizer, por exemplo, bom, do ponto de vista económico, nós temos um problema que é o custo do trabalho. Não, isso não é uma recuperação justa. Uma recuperação na qual estejamos confrontados com a situação de, bom, o custo das pensões é demasiado elevado. Isso não é uma recuperação justa. Os serviços públicos precisam de ser trimmed, precisam de ser cortados. Isso não é uma recuperação justa, porque o critério essencial tem que ser colocado exatamente na pessoa, não no cidadão, que é outra discussão completamente diferente, mas na pessoa. E isso é que é essencial e é por aí que passa a recuperação justa.
Vasco, obrigado. Muito obrigado. Stay with us, of course. Let's move on online to Michael Lei, Secretary General of Solidar and the Solidar Foundation. Michael, tell us about, from the trade union standpoint, what is a fair recovery for workers?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me here in this distinguished panel and this event, representing Solidar, a network of progressive civil society organizations across Europe. And I think for trade unions and civil society alike, a fair recovery is one that leads to social justice through a just transition. We build back better towards a new normal, one that prioritizes support to the populations through clear investments and that have been to the ones that have been suffering most, not only from the current and ongoing health and social crisis, but ever since the austerity measures that followed the previous financial crisis, pushing frontline workers, healthcare and social workers, informal workers, unemployed, migrants and refugees, rural and urban communities out of systems of social security, essentially leaving them behind. And these constituencies are also the ones that our members have been supporting throughout this period and in the pandemic, filling the gaps left by a starved public sector and from which the state has essentially withdrawn. And if we are to build a fair recovery, this must lead to the creation of a truly social and sustainable Europe with clear and bold measures both at the European level as well as among member states. And I'm happy to have my colleague and friend from CORE here because, of course, local communities and municipalities have a key role to play in this recovery. COVID has revealed the brutality of pre-existing inequalities and exacerbated them. And the Recovery and the Resilience Plan, the European Green Deal, the European Pillar of Social Rights, coupled with debates of the future of Europe that are starting on Sunday, are opportunities for the EU to meet the expectations on the Union in these trying times. I would say it's a make it or break it kind of situation for the European Union in the eyes of citizens, but already starting to wane in their support for the Union as a political project. So we have a dire task for us in the coming years, and I think Social Summit could be one of those moments when we could take important steps. And I hope to see that as well. Fair in this regard is also taking into account not just the past, the present, but as my colleague said, also the future. And this means coupling the social dimension with the sustainability and the need for a development model that is not pushing us beyond a point of no return. We therefore also would say that a fair recovery is one that ensures that the green and digital transitions contribute to tackling existing as well as future inequalities. If not, that project of a greener Europe will also be not one that fosters a sense of belonging to the European Union, but one that makes the cracks even more visible. An inclusive and holistic approach should remedy this, to make sure that a social Europe cares for all Europeans, no matter where in life they find themselves, and to do so in a sustainable way through just transition that fosters social and democratic participation through civil dialogue and social dialogue.
Okay, Mikael, thank you very much. I'd like to have one last question to the German minister. Hubertus, was in Ihrer Meinung morgen wie optimistisch sind Sie, dass wir diese Elementen von dieser SD-Deklaration in diese Porto-Deklaration erreichen können?
Also wir müssen hart dafür arbeiten. Bei mir fällt auf, dass in Europa in der politischen Konkurrenz zu Recht viel von digitalem Wandel und von ökologischem Wandel die Rede ist, aber zu wenig von sozialem. Da ist die portugiesische Ratspräsidentschaft eine Riesenchance, dass Portugal, dass meine Kollegin Ana Mendes Godinho, dass unser Genosse Costa das Thema in den Mittelpunkt gesetzt hat. Was haben wir in der Trio-Ratspräsidentschaft besprochen? Es ist eine Riesenchance für uns, deutlich zu machen, dass man digitalen, ökologischen und sozialen Wandel gleichzeitig gestalten muss. Dass es Fortschritt nicht für wenige gibt, sondern möglichst für viele. Dass wir dafür sorgen, dass diese Covid-Krise dazu führt, dass es einen Aufbruch gibt zu mehr Chancengleichheit, zu mehr Gerechtigkeit in diesem Kontinent. Dass wir uns besinnen, dass Europa die Verbindung ist von Demokratie, Marktwirtschaft und starken Sozialstaaten. Dass wir dafür sorgen, dass aus digitalem Fortschritt sozialer Fortschritt wird. Dass wir die Zukunft der Arbeit gestalten. Dass wir für die Gleichstellung von Männern und Frauen kämpfen. Das können nur Progressive und Sozialdemokraten gemeinsam. Aber wir müssen wirklich kämpfen. Alleine werden wir es nicht schaffen.
Okay, wir müssen kämpfen. Morgen, wie möglich ist es, dass wir nicht nur Ziele sehen können, aber Targets with Teeth, Ziele mit Zähne?
Ich mache zwei konkrete Beispiele. Eine Maßnahme in Europa wäre, einen Rahmen zu schaffen für Mindestsicherungssysteme, die menschenwürdige und diskriminierungsfreie Mindestsicherung in jedem Mitgliedstaat ermöglichen. Diesen Rahmen brauchen wir. Zweitens, wir müssen uns in der Familie der Sozialdemokraten Progressiven auch zusammenraufen, damit wir wirklich eine Richtlinie für europäische Mindestlöhne und mehr Sozialpartnerschaft bekommen. Das sind zwei revolutionäre Taten, wenn wir das machen. Und dann wird die soziale Säule Europas nicht nur Wording sein, nicht nur Ziele, sondern zu konkreter Gesetzgebung werden. Sie haben recht, oder wir haben recht, wir müssen von den Werten zur Aktion kommen. Das ist die Aufgabe, die wir jetzt vor uns haben. Dafür ist morgen eine Chance. Wir sind gar nicht so wenig, aber wir müssen lauter werden miteinander. Und ich bin froh, dass das jetzt portugiesische Ratspräsidentschaft ist, denn Portugal ist sehr inspirierend auf diesem Weg. Die haben auch die letzte Recovery nach der Finanzkrise damals fair gestaltet und das ist, glaube ich, ermutigend auch für die Aufgabe, die vor uns ist.
Hubertus, vielen Dank. Vasco, last question to you. Kind of the same thing. How much are you optimistic that we can get targets with teeth in tomorrow's Porto Declaration?
Bem, eu penso que amanhã é uma oportunidade de todos os líderes europeus darem expressão prática àquele que é o motto da presidência portuguesa. Time to deliver. Time to deliver is now. So, é a parte mais importante que me parece que deve estar presente. Nós não temos tempo a perder. Quer pelas circunstâncias que derivam do tempo que levou de Gothenburg até agora, quer pela emergência da recuperação face à crise de Covid-19. E por isso a mensagem é clara, não só para o poder europeu, nacional, regional e local. It's time to deliver in the social pillar.
Maybe one sentence. It's the old sentence of Freddie Roosevelt. We have nothing to fear but the fear itself. And I think this is time for a progressive agenda. On the other side of the Atlantic, Joe Biden does it.
Yes.
And we also have it.
That's a big responsibility. It's up to you.
And you.
Yeah, it's up to everybody. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the speakers also connected. Thank you very much as well to have all your input on that panel. let us move on to the next panel. And as we do make that shift, we're going to have to be cleaning as we do for the COVID crisis. We have to clean the stands as well. We are moving on to some keynote inspirational speeches on sustainable well-being for all and the social dimension of the green and digital transitions. How do we make that transition in a fair way? And in some ways we saw with the yellow vests that we were trying to make a green transition in France, and it backfired. How do we address the social aspect to avoid some kind of backlash in making this digital transition and the green transition? Tech tips, I might remind you, if you hear a good soundbite, please cast it wider with the hashtag EU Social Summit 21 and hashtag social rights. And we are going to try to stay closer to time. Time is flying, but all the very important points made. But in any case, speakers, please do keep that in mind. I'd like to first introduce my two guests here in the studio, here in Porto, live. It's amazing to be together in the context. Luca Vicentini, General Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, ITUC. Buongiorno, buonasera. And Pedro Marques, S&D Group Vice President and member of the European Parliament. We see each other again. We did a webcast earlier this week in Brussels, and we're back again.
Yes,
but before I get to the two of you, I need to talk to Teresa Ribera. Teresa, you're Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, co-chair of the Independent Commission for Sustainable Equality. And that's interesting that you're actually working with the former Prime Minister of Denmark, Paul Rasmussen, on this Independent Commission for Sustainable Equality. I think it's quite interesting because I just might mention as a footnote, it's thanks to Mr. Rasmussen, that the Maastricht Treaty was approved in Denmark, and that was a very key thing that led to the euro, of course, and to the further integration of the EU. And this is where, Teresa, you're working with Paul to bring about sustainable equality. Tell us about that, Teresa.
Hello, good afternoon. This is small pressure, so it must be inspirational, sustainable well-being, and so many things at the same time. And as you were saying, yes, I'm colliding with Paul a very interesting exercise on what next, how to combine all these references. I think that Paul has contributed along the years, as it has been the case for our political family, trying to move forward in an inclusive and fair manner what we want to build in Europe along the last decades, but along the last years too. And most of what we have been witnessing around the green understanding of well-being has social democrat progressive signature, as it has been the case for Pedro Timmermans and in the council, João Pedro. So I think that it has been quite interesting what we have been promoting, what we have been investing in, and what we have been trying to do is to think what next, what type of big challenges and how we can address this very important combination of the social and green interlinkages in the future to build. In a very particular situation, because this year we have been fronted to the fact that we are much more vulnerable of what we could think, and we need to recover, to rebuild an economy and a society that has been touched, has been harmed by a deep pandemic. And this has driven us into something which is quite primary. Very important words that remind us of around us. We have been talking about public services, health system, public coverage, environmental challenges and environmental weakness, interdependence among the different countries of the world, but also within the societies. And this inspires us on how we can build next this big transformation, and this has been commented in the previous session. We know that we have a very important opportunity to transform the future we want to build, to make it stronger, more inclusive, fairer, or more sustainable. This is something not only possible but pretty necessary. But it deserves strong political energy, paying attention not just on the big macroeconomic pictures, but paying attention to the microeconomic effects, so the distributional effects, the fears that people can feel, and the different ways people understand the big menaces and the big opportunities. So taking into consideration these demands of big, important, strong dialogue between us, policymakers, and the society, as well as the members of the academia that are investing in this type of effects. This is the work that we have been trying to pursue with the intention to deliver the Sustainable Human and Planetary Wellbeing report coming from our group, with a comprehensive understanding, a comprehensive roadmap that inspires the European socialist projects in the journey towards sustainable human and planetary well-being, taking into consideration that green is important, but it is even more important that in this transformation we take into consideration the transactional divergences or unfairness or vulnerabilities we may be facing that can deal with energy poverty, that can deal with the big transformation of the labor market and the skills that need to be taken into consideration and being promoted. And then the social policies together with the environmental policies strengthening the economic response. We have the duty of proposing these new audacious proposals to our European colleagues, and we are reasonably optimistic on how they can be welcomed by the society on its own. There is an additional comment to be made, which is the external dimension of all of this. I think that the importance of Europe being credible elsewhere relies also on the credibility of Europe at home, but it works the other way around. Being credible at home also implies taking into consideration the effects of our external policies when we work with partners and with other players in a very small interdependent work.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you very much. Let me. You talked about this transformation in the labor market. I'm sure I want to shift over to Luca Vicentini over at the European Trade Union Confederation. This shift in the labor market, in the way we work, and the digitalization, it requires change in how societies approach work, and how companies approach work, and how workers, their protections must evolve, like for instance, the right to disconnect, right?
Well, Chris, yes, but I mean, we should stop telling workers in Europe all the time that they have to change, because they have been already through 4 crises: globalization and financiarization of the economy, then the financial and economic crisis, then the austerity period, then now COVID, and now they have to face other crises: climate change, digitalization, with no protection. Well, this is not the scenario we can design for workers in the future. That's why I think that in the Social Summit, with an action plan for the European Pillar of Social Rights, the first things that we all must do is to give a message of hope about the future to working people in this continent.
And then concretely, what does that mean in the declaration that the summit should arrive at? What concretely should it have to improve working conditions?
Well, first of all, there are 3 targets, 3 headline targets in this action plan, and they are quite important because the targets are increasing the level of employment, quality jobs, I would say, not just employment. We need really to ensure quality jobs for everybody. Second, making sure that people are equipped with the right skills to face the climate, digital, and economic transition. And third, last but not least, making sure that we can lift people out of poverty through better wages, better working conditions, and social protection. But to achieve these targets, we need tools. And there it comes an action plan. 4 things at least: money, the money of the Recovery and Resilience Funds, of the MFF, all this has to go to achieve these targets. Then we need good laws, because we don't have enough good laws to make sure that we can have decent wages, decent working conditions, etc. Third, we need to change our economic model because with the current fiscal rules, it's impossible to achieve these targets. The current fiscal rules are old-fashioned austerity-based, so we have really to reform.
You mean about fiscal rules about government spending?
Absolutely. And fourth, and last but not least for us, social dialogue, collective bargaining, involvement of social partners. These four factors are the ones that can make a difference in achieving these three targets, I think.
Okay. Let me shift over to Pedro Marques, S&D Group Vice President, member of the European Parliament. You're on the Committee of Regional Development, also the Subcommittee on Taxation. A couple of questions for you. One is, though, there is headwind that this summit is going into because there are 11 countries of the 27 that signed a letter saying they're saying basically hands off some of these policies. These are national policies, you don't touch them. I'll quote from the letter: respect national authority over policy making in areas such as labor, employment, pensions, education, childcare. How do you counter that at a summit?
Boa tarde, bem-vindos ao Porto, a Matosinhos. Este é um momento de inspiração e eu gostava que daqui, mas também, claro, da Cimeira Social da manhã, que os líderes europeus levassem essa inspiração e essa ambição de fazer mais em matéria do pilar social. Nós temos, fruto do trabalho do Stefan Löfven em Gothenburg, depois desta prioridade que o António Costa deu ao pilar social, agora com a Cimeira do Porto, e do trabalho do Nicolas Schmit na Comissão Europeia relativamente ao plano de ação, nós temos uma oportunidade de fazer mais no pilar social. E o que eu digo aos líderes europeus que têm dúvidas sobre o papel da Europa nas políticas sociais e no pilar social é que, se nós tivéssemos, os países um a um, tivessem capacidade de fazer tudo o que fazia falta em matéria de direitos laborais, em matéria de combate à pobreza infantil, se tivessem condições para fazer o que queremos fazer em matéria de igualdade de género, por exemplo, ao nível salarial, se cada país o pudesse fazer sozinho, já tinha feito, certamente. Os cidadãos europeus lançaram-nos um desafio. 9 em cada 10 cidadãos europeus disseram prioridade ao pilar social, aos direitos sociais. Então este é o tempo de entregar resultados. E eu tenho ideias concretas que acho que nós temos que pôr no terreno para concretizar o plano de ação que o Nicolas Schmit apresentou. Eu quero dizer claramente, é inaceitável que a Europa, ao fim de tantos anos, este continente o mais desenvolvido, um dos mais desenvolvidos e prósperos do mundo, e que quer ser o mais coeso, tenha ainda tantas crianças em pobreza extrema. Pois eu gostava de dizer que acho que nós podemos fazer agora o que faz falta fazer, o que ainda não fizemos para combater a pobreza extrema das crianças. 150 euros por mês é o que nós precisamos, é o que basta para retirar 5 milhões de crianças que ainda estão a viver em pobreza extrema na Europa. A Europa pode fazer isto. E se os países o pudessem fazer sozinhos, já tinham feito. Então vamos fazer juntos, vamos fazer como europeus, vamos fazer no âmbito do Pilar Europeu dos Direitos Sociais e no contexto do plano de ação que o Nicolas Schmit nos apresentou. Com a liderança do António Costa agora no Conselho, com a dinâmica que sairá da Cimeira Social, eu acho que nós podemos fazer diferente e entregar resultados para ter uma Europa melhor em 2030 e certamente uma Europa com muito menos pobreza infantil.
I have a question that I would like to ask from the audience. I mean, it's very difficult to get the questions because the time is flying, but I could ask one question actually to Luca. Luca, there's an elderly person saying, well, you do talk a lot about unemployment for youth, but what about for me? I'm elderly, and it's hard for elderly people to find work. How should they be helped by this summit?
Yeah, exactly, because we have, for sure, a lot of young people that are not offered any job after being trained for so long and very well, but then they are unemployed. But we have also, and when they are offered a job, by the way, is very often precarious, but then we have people that have been got out from the labor market because of restructuring processes, because of climate change, digitalization, and cannot find any other opportunity.
Yeah.
So boosting active labor market policies, making sure that there is money enough to create new jobs in the communities where these jobs have been disrupted, this is really the crucial element. When we talk about just transition, we don't mean just reskilling people, because if you are 55, 60 years old, you can be reskilled, but then if you don't have any offer for for a decent job, you are just lost in the labor market. So we really need to have targeted targeted policies with correct investment, targeted investment to create new jobs, offer these new jobs to the people in the communities, and making sure they can be accompanied through social protection and training towards a better condition. And then we don't have to forget that we have also the pensioners, and the pensioners have been seeing their lives destroyed by the pandemic and before that by the economic crisis. Pension reforms was the mantra to adjust public budgets in each and every country of the European Union. This is no more what we have to do. We have to, on the contrary, to guarantee everybody a decent salary, a decent income, or a decent pension. So these are the elements that must be part of the action plan for the pillar. And as was said before, member states have to commit, because 3.5 years has passed after Gothenburg. 20 fantastic principles in the pillar, but at national level, very little implementation. The European Commission has delivered a lot of legislative initiatives in the meantime, but member states are still blocking this implementation. I will tell tomorrow to the leaders at the end of the social summit, when we will have to deliver our statement to support the joint declaration, I will tell them, you have signed a letter telling us that you want respect for national prerogatives. But when national prerogatives means very well working systems, nobody wants to touch them. But when the systems at national level are just generating divergence, dumping, and unfair competition, we have to get rid of that. We have to stop all this. This is not a single market. This is not a social market economy that we want to build. So there must be responsibility and solidarity. Otherwise, we don't go anywhere for anybody in Europe.
Thank you, Luca. Let me shift over to Teresa. I have a question, Teresa, from the audience. Are you ready? The question from Tony on Facebook says, the theme here is for a fair recovery. How can this happen when capitalism continues to fail the weak, the poor, the homeless, the unemployed, with rents being increased and incomes falling? I might just mention, too, though, that you have a transition policy in Spain to ensure fair and inclusive ecological transition. So maybe it is possible if we evolve policy, right?
I think I share much of what it has been stated by Luca, but not all. I think that we also need to work on the ground. I think that we need a regulation and a political commitment towards this fairness and the correction of this imbalance in many circumstances in this quick transition that takes place right now, and in order to prevent further damage in the time to come if we do not pay attention today. But at the same time, people is not waiting for a proposal to say no, but needs to be involved in the concrete responsibilities and in the creation of the opportunities. So what we have done, and I have to say that it has been quite intense, is that when we had to face the fact that 85% of our coal-installed power capacity was going to be phased out in less than 3 years, and this is, I can assure you, quite a complicated issue in terms of social impact, not in terms of economic or environmental impact, but yes, in terms of social impact. We need to be sure that we have the mechanism, regulatory mechanism, and finance, public finance mechanism, including social policies that can cover people and villages, but can also be available to invest in new options in the same neighborhoods, in the same cities, in the same regions where this industrial life collapses. And in order to build the responses, we need to take into consideration what people want for their own future. So it is quite intense in terms of facilitating this discussion. We come along with you. The mechanisms are already there, but it is important that we can facilitate a broader debate on how you see the opportunities that you have in front of you because of the endogenous resources. You can count on that. And there is something that Luca has also said that I think it is important. It is not just a question of re-skilling, Reskilling can be important for many of these workers if we have the opportunities of new employment being created in the surroundings. But it is also important to pay attention to the children, to the daughters and sons of these workers in these villages, because for them, the future they were building, or they were prepared for, is not going to take place under the same circumstances. But we cannot allow this additional big empty black hole in the places where they used to live. So we need to have positive incentives and capacity to break the gap that could be growing up in these regions through an additional effort to provide means, education, opportunities, and skilling, not just reskilling, but skilling the young generations of these villages, so to ensure that there can be other possibilities in the same region if they want to stay.
Thanks, Teresa. I'd like to shift over to Hélène Fritzon. Are you still with us, Hélène? You still online? Can we shift over to Hélène? Yes, you're still there. Great. And I think we talked about this during a webcast a couple of weeks ago, but tell us a little bit more about what you would like to see tomorrow in this Porto Summit about promoting gender equality. What specifically would you like to be said in that Porto Declaration about gender equality? Closing the gap.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. And I will. All the speakers have spoken about existing inequalities, and they have increased both between generations, between workers, between member states, regions, but as well as between men and women. And I really look forward, because we must push for gender equality in almost all areas of life, in all our world. Achievements linked to gender equality are being rolled back, and this is unacceptable. And you know, before the crisis, 1/3 of all European women do not have their own job, and the situation is harder during the crisis because women are hit harder, and we know that women are also at the front line, so they are more affected also in their work. So I really hope that the negotiations tomorrow, they will be clear, and they will send a clear message. They will have clear targets and concrete actions, so we can step up our efforts to fight discrimination, violence, and that we can close the gender gaps in employment, but also in pay and pensions. Because we need to say to the young generation that we take responsibility for your future, and therefore we need a strong welfare state in all the member states, and we need public services, and we need to push for all these very important issues about gender equality, and of course a green economy, a green society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hélène. I'd like to have one final question, right over to you. That the question of taxation, because Manuel, you're on that subcommittee on taxation, and we've talked about this before, you and I, about the digital tax. Probably a lot of leaders tomorrow are going to be saying, how are we going to pay for all this? Well, they're going to have to raise money through different ways, and maybe what is the chance that we can have a digital tax soon?
Well, I think there is a bigger chance now. We have had, as Europe, we took important decisions on creating this kind of new taxes, and plus putting them as own resources for the European budget, so not just then handing all the money away to the member states, because we do need to strengthen the European budget so that we can do all those things that we referred to at the European level, and not always only counting on the member states. Yeah. And yes, it is more feasible now because the Biden administration is now on board as well for this new corporate taxation, fairer corporate taxation, so that the big multinationals of the digital, and not just the digital, they would pay a fair share of taxes. And also what we are doing at the OECD level also goes into the direction of these offshores that we have all around the world. I mean, this has to stop, right? And this is also the kind of negotiation we are having at the OECD level. So all of this will create, hopefully, more resources, a fairer taxation, because we do need, as you said, the resources to finance the recovery, and I mean, to finance these policies when we want to tackle child poverty, to finance the Green Deal, because that also needs resources. So
right.
we need that. And now we have a path, we have an idea, a concrete idea that we are discussing and approving, hopefully, at the OECD level, and then we have to implement it here in Europe. And I mean, I wouldn't like to see any excuse by any member state saying, no, I don't want these taxes to go higher because I compete through taxes. That's unacceptable. Competition within Europe through taxation is completely unacceptable, because that's just a race to the bottom that is impeding us to have decent pensions, to have decent child guarantees, child benefits. No, we do not accept any kind of race to the bottom, and we will not accept that from any member state.
No race to the bottom. There's a hashtag quote, okay. We can pose a couple more questions because we're waiting for the next panel to get all of our high-level people together. It's taking a little bit of time, so I'm going to go over to Luca again. And in a recent webcast, I talked with Thea Jark, who is Itak Youth.
Yeah.
Thea Jark. And I asked her about this Future of Work report that her group released. And it has a number of aspects that actually could apply to not just to youth, but to others. I mean, about the gig economy, about rights related to digitalization, such as the right to disconnect, lifelong learning, as we talked about with the elderly question, the person from the elderly person, and the idea of rights for trainees who have these internships that just continue to roll over and they don't get paid or get paid very much. What would you like to see in this Porto Declaration that addresses that kind of thing, these concerns that were raised in the Future of Work report?
Yeah, well, I mean, the perspective of Thea, as all the other young people in Europe, is exactly to guarantee a decent future for them in terms of work. And of course, if we continue just proposing to have precarious jobs or endless training with no pay, that's exactly not the future that we have to build up. Of course, we have to take into account the transformations that are going to happen in the labor market, because climate change, digitalization, now telework, and many other things, I mean, that are happening all around are going to have an influence, I mean, in reshaping the labor market. And we cannot even imagine that we will have only one kind of working contract or working status. So the problem is how we really guarantee that everybody, wherever is the working status, wherever is the sector or the type of work they are performing, can have a decent job. And having a decent job means having, as I said before, a decent salary, and this can be achieved only through strong minimum wages and strong collective bargaining. It means having their health and safety protected, and this can be achieved only through decent legal frameworks with obligations and sanctions, and this means having also a decent social protection. Yeah. And by the way, the ILO, in the Commission for the Future of Work,
International Labour Organization,
exactly, we want a global social protection fund and a social contract at global level. This is exactly what we need to shape a decent future of work for everybody.
Okay, well, but what about this youth guarantee? Been talk about that for quite some time. Where are we with that? A youth guarantee being that if a youth is out of a job or out of school, they should have some kind of offer of a job or education or internship within 4 months. There's been a lot of talk about that. Where are we now with that?
Well, we know perfectly how it went, the first wave of the youth guarantee. These offers came, but they were just for training or traineeship. never for a job. And why? Just because the first edition of the Youth Guarantee was based on the economic policies that were implemented at that moment. And at that moment, we were implementing a jobless recovery. All the money was invested just for profits and productivity. And there was no attention and no focus on job creation. So the second wave of the Youth Guarantee that is starting now, thanks to Nicola Schmidt and to the different frameworks that surround, let's say, the second Youth Guarantee, these measures have to make sure that we can also offer jobs, decent jobs to young people. And the only way to do it is to change the economic policy and focus on investment for job creation.
Okay, and in this summit, in this Porto summit, how would you like to see that Youth Guarantee strengthened?
But it's exactly about making sure that the targets of the pillar, employment in particular, means job creation. And the job creation is financed through the multi-annual financial framework and through the investment that is contained in the recovery strategy of the European Union. But this means that the economic policy must serve job creation, must serve social protection, must serve public services. The money has to go where it's needed. And where it's needed now is to recreate our social model.
Pedro Marquez, one other question, Pedro, about regional development, because you are on that committee on regional development. How do you address that concern in this Porto Declaration, in what's going to be talked about the next day?
It is actually foreseen that this is one of the important discussions, and we do hope that the regional dimension of the transitions is well handled in this declaration, because there is a regional dimension and there is an issue with regional cohesion that will arise from the Green Deal, the green transition, the digital transition, because the impact in different regions is completely different. In rural areas, in urban areas, in most remote areas in Europe, the impacts are completely different.
Yeah, there's
when you talk about transportation,
a huge gap.
Cost of transportation, cost of energy, all of that. So obviously, if there is a different impact from region to region, there must be also a way to address it differently. That's what we did recently with the Just Transition Fund. And I think that's exactly what we need to do more from now on, because the resources for the Just Transition Fund are really limited. We need more. And we need the same paradigm, this idea of a fair transition being supported also by European funding. Now that we have more policies on energy, on transport that will impact people's lives differently, we need regional policy to step up. That's what also I expect from the declaration of the summit tomorrow.
Okay, and a lot of people are saying this is a crucial moment in the middle of the COVID crisis. We need a social aspect for this recovery to happen in a fair way, to rebuild fairly, to make this digital transition fair, to make the green transition fair. How much do you think this Porto Declaration can address that?
I mean, it really should, because for a while now we didn't have this opportunity. The momentum is created because Antonio Costa brought this back from Gothenburg. Nicola Schmidt presented at the correct timing the action plan. So the conditions are there now. We need the prime ministers, we need the governments to commit to this European approach, to this going back to welfare state, to this going back to social policy as a priority. Let me give you an example of what we need now, and not for the future, for now. We are discussing now with the Commission, every member state is discussing the national recovery plans. We have targets for green policies at the national recovery plans. We have targets for digital policies at the national recovery plans. This is the moment now to put also ambitious targets to the social dimension at the national recovery plans, because we won't get a second opportunity. That's where the money is now, and that's where we need the money to come to handle the social consequences of the transitions, and by the way, the social consequences of this crisis. That's why this is the moment. This is really the moment to get it.
And in the S&D declaration, there's wording in there, I don't have it right in front of me, but something about how if we want a sustainable Europe, we must strengthen the social aspect. If we fail at this, could that put the EU in question in the long run?
Certainly the ambition for, we as a group, but the Europe as a whole, we went all in on the Green Deal. We put all there, it's our new growth strategy, which is correct. But as we have seen in France, If you put those policies about the green transition forward, but you don't handle at the same time the social consequences, you won't get the transition. You just get the gilets jaunes. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Voilà.
Franz Timmermans has said correctly that either the transition is fair or there won't be any transition at all, and I concur with him. We need to put the social dimension from the beginning of the transitions, and there was a question, by the way, from one of the people that you put to Luca about the elderly workers.
Yeah.
That's another great example on the digitalization, on the digital transition. It's happening now.
Yeah.
And yes, the elderly workers are more at risk on that transition. We need to address that now. They need to be reskilled, and we need to create jobs at the local communities even, for those people to have a real opportunity. So that's why this is the moment. We created the moment. Antonio Costa brought us all to Porto. Now we have to deliver. It would be a huge frustration for Europe if we couldn't get it. So I'm really confident that tomorrow the Prime Ministers understand, and obviously the day after, that this is the moment to deliver.
Hashtag now we have to deliver.
Yeah.
I'm throwing that in
right.
somewhere. Pedro, thank you very much. Thank you also to Teresa, to Luca as well. Thank you very much for this panel. And let's wrap this up and go to the final panel as well. Good luck tomorrow in your talks as well. Thank you. And again, observing the COVID regulations, we're going to prepare the podiums for this final closing session called Sustainable Wellbeing Starts Now. Starts now. It kind of reminds me of that old Smith song, How Soon Is Now? How soon is now? And when the leaders talk tomorrow, maybe they should be asked, how soon is now? We're going to have, please, if you could join us, we're a very strong, a very powerful picture tonight to close with.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Hello.
I'm sorry I can't shake hands, but to have the mayor of Paris, to have two prime ministers, is quite a powerful picture. Quite a powerful picture to send with a message to the 27 leaders tomorrow that these people mean it. They mean it. That something has to be done tomorrow during this summit. And I'd like to first, introduce everybody. Stefan Löfven, the Prime Minister of Sweden, welcome. You're also leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party, welcome. Anne Hidalgo, Mayor of Paris, bonjour. Antonio Costa, again, Prime Minister of Portugal, welcome back, yeah? No, wait a minute. Antonio, you're over there. I'm getting it mixed up.
No problem.
So sorry. Antonio, you switched.
It's vulgar.
I see. Right. Sergei, you threw me off. All right. Sergei Stanishev, President of the PES, we saw you earlier. And Irache. Welcome back, Irache. Garcia Perez, President of the S&D Group, welcome. So this is the final call to action by some of the top figures in Europe on what should be done about this social aspect of the way the EU operates, about the European Union operates. Let me begin with Anne Hidalgo. Quel est le point de vue du social, de la perspective d'une maire d'une capitale, où moi j'ai habité pendant 7 ans, et le lien entre le social et l'environnement, comme vous cherchez à faire à Paris en fait?
Très bien. Merci. Tout d'abord, un grand merci au PSE pour cette invitation, et puis merci bien sûr à Antonio Costa d'avoir porté dans la présidence européenne, cette présidence portugaise, d'avoir porté ce message très très fort sur le lien entre le social et aussi les révolutions, qu'elles soient sur l'écologie ou sur le digital. La perspective qui est devant nous est une perspective très très importante. Je crois que nous le savons tous, nous sommes à un moment historique à la fois pour l'Europe mais aussi pour le monde. La pandémie a bouleversé nos économies, nos systèmes sociaux, nos démocraties. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons cette opportunité, grâce aux décisions qui ont été portées au niveau européen, de porter des politiques très concrètes pour engager les transformations de notre économie pour que nous allions vers une économie verte et pour une économie décarbonée. Le Green Deal, d'ailleurs, est une très très bonne nouvelle pour l'ensemble des Européens et des villes européennes. Et puis, il y a aussi évidemment cette prise en considération du fait que sans le social, sans de la justice sociale, sans un travail vis-à-vis des classes moyennes dans nos différents pays, mais aussi des plus fragiles, nous ne pourrons pas nous en sortir. Et la perspective que je voudrais porter ici, c'est celle des villes. Je pense que nous avons besoin, très fortement besoin, d'une véritable alliance, d'une forme d'alignement de différents niveaux de gouvernance. Le niveau européen qui donne le cadre, qui a posé d'ailleurs les conditions d'un plan de relance très très ambitieux, est un cadre absolument indispensable. Les États qui évidemment doivent pouvoir, dans la souveraineté qui est la leur, accompagner ces transformations économiques et ces transformations sociales. Les deux vont ensemble, sinon rien ne peut se passer. Les villes, les niveaux locaux, et je veux vraiment insister là-dessus, si nous voulons que ces orientations, ces objectifs, cette vision qui est portée aujourd'hui par l'Union européenne puisse se traduire concrètement dans la vie des citoyens européens et qu'ils deviennent aussi des acteurs et des défendeurs de cette Europe qui doit être plus concrète pour eux, il faut impliquer les villes. Les villes sont les espaces, les gouvernements à échelle humaine où nous pouvons organiser justement cette cohésion. Les villes sont un lieu extraordinaire pour faire en sorte que convergent les besoins des entreprises, les visions des entrepreneurs et du secteur privé, bien sûr les politiques portées par les États et l'Union européenne, mais surtout l'adhésion et la mobilisation des citoyens, qu'ils soient d'ailleurs des citoyens dans le monde du travail, et tout ce qui est dit sur la mobilisation dans le monde du travail est exceptionnel, mais aussi les citoyens qui trouvent des solutions, parce qu'on a la chance en Europe d'avoir partout des citoyens très très créatifs. Mon message principal, c'est que vraiment on doit arriver à conjuguer ces différents niveaux de gouvernance et donner une place plus grande et peut-être des liens plus directs aussi entre les villes et le niveau de gouvernance européen.
Prime Minister Löfven, you are going to be sitting at the table tomorrow with 26 other leaders. How much do you think that the elements of the S&D declaration on social issues can be integrated into that Porto declaration on the social aspect?
To a large extent, and I expect, because we need a clear social dimension into everything what we do. Look, the whole economy, societies, everything is built on ordinary people's work. It's labor. So I think it's obvious that we need a much stronger social dimension to just put people at the very center. So no matter what we talk about, we need to think, how do we improve people's lives? Because for too long time, this cooperation, which is very important, I mean the European Union, for too long time has been regarded for something for the capital flow, the goods flow, which is good because we need it. But that's our means. That's a tool for us. But at the very center, how do we improve people's lives? So I expect it to be very, very close aligned.
How much do you think we could perhaps see a child guarantee, a stronger youth guarantee, a minimum wage EU-wide?
Well, as perhaps many know, a European minimum wage is not exactly my medicine. I think we need to improve minimum wages. We need to improve. So So when we develop our economies, of course, workers, employees need to improve their standard, living standard. That's important. Exactly how we do that, in my view, we should manage that. We have a Portuguese culture, a Swedish culture, a German, and so on. But because the point with the social, the pillar was to build upon 20 principles and then act from our different national cultures, traditions, but to follow them and measure and see how do we proceed. But I do also see that we need some minimum standards. Working environment is such a subject, I think, where we need to have a closer limit.
Prime Minister Costa, you are also going to be sitting at that table tomorrow, and congratulations for organizing this, by the way, and having the rotating EU presidency, and for inviting us here, actually. Thank you very much. How optimistic are you that the aspects from the S&D declaration can be worked into the Porto Declaration?
Bom, muito obrigado a todos. Isso.
Please, go ahead.
Tempo para... Não, muito obrigado a todos, já Irache, por me ter convidado a estar aqui. Queria aproveitar por começar por dar um agradecimento a todo o grupo SND pelo apoio que tem dado à presidência portuguesa e aos vários resultados concretos que já conseguimos na nossa presidência com o Parlamento Europeu. Eu creio que a realização da Cimeira Social e o pilar social da União Europeia é uma grande vitória da nossa família política. Em 2017, Stefan organizou em Gothenburg uma cimeira onde foi possível proclamar os 20 princípios do pilar social. Em março passado, um comissário socialista, Nicolás Schmit, apresentou o plano de ação que faltava para concretizar os princípios e pôr em ação os princípios. E estamos agora, numa presidência que cabe a um governo socialista, a organizar precisamente esta Cimeira Social, que pode amanhã ser assinalada por um momento histórico, onde pela primeira vez vamos ter um acordo tripartido à escala europeia, juntando os sindicatos, as associações representativas das empresas, da sociedade civil, a assinar em conjunto com o Presidente do Parlamento Europeu e a Presidente da Comissão o compromisso do Porto sobre a execução do pilar social. E espero que depois de amanhã o Conselho aprove também o endosso político do plano de ação apresentado por Nicolás Schmit. Portanto, eu acho que a nossa família política tem bons motivos para estar orgulhosa daquilo que já se conseguiu. Temos princípios, temos um plano de ação, vamos ter um apoio social assinado e um compromisso na execução do plano de ação e depois ficamos com a estrada aberta para a execução do plano de ação. E o plano de ação depois, naturalmente, desenvolve-se em diferentes dimensões. Desenvolve-se, desde logo, presente em todas as políticas. Desde logo, os diferentes planos de recuperação e resiliência que estamos a elaborar têm que ter em conta o que é o plano de ação para os direitos sociais. Há diferentes iniciativas legislativas, umas já apresentadas, outras por apresentar, que porão em prática o plano de ação. Umas mais consensuais, outras menos consensuais, mas, por exemplo, é muito importante, já apresentada, sobre a transparência salarial para combatermos o gap salarial entre homens e mulheres. Muito importante as iniciativas sobre a conciliação da vida pessoal, familiar e profissional. Mas a existência desse plano de ação é, sobretudo, importante para termos sucesso nas grandes políticas que a União Europeia decidiu. Nós decidimos que a reconstrução assenta na dupla transição climática e digital, é fundamental, mas não podemos ignorar que para essas duas transições terem sucesso é fundamental termos um sólido pilar social. Um sólido pilar social que invista na formação, nos skills, upskills, reskilling das pessoas para que todas possam participar nessa transição, que investam na ciência, na inovação, para que as nossas empresas possam ser cada vez mais competitivas e garantam uma proteção social sólida para que ninguém fique deixado para trás. Porque é evidente que esta transição é essencial, mas esta transição tem riscos. A transição digital vai aumentar a automação, vai libertar seguramente tempo livre para os trabalhadores, vai libertar muitos trabalhadores de tarefas rotineiras, pouco criativas, que as máquinas podem substituir. Mas coloca uma questão, que é a oportunidade que temos que dar às pessoas que ocupavam esses postos de trabalho de terem novas oportunidades na vida e não serem deixadas para trás. A transição climática é absolutamente fundamental. Portugal orgulha-se de ser indicado pela Comissão Europeia como o país que tem melhores condições de assegurar, de alcançar o objetivo dos 55% de redução. Mas isso tem custos. Acaba de encerrar há poucos meses, aqui precisamente neste Conselho de Matosinhos, uma refinaria. É um enorme ganho para a redução das emissões de CO2, mas é um enorme problema a necessidade de termos que responder às necessidades de garantir emprego a todos aqueles que aqui trabalhavam e que têm que ter a oportunidade de transitarem para novos empregos. E, portanto, este pilar social na área da formação, do emprego, do combate à pobreza, é absolutamente fundamental. E, com toda a franqueza, se há obra que podemos reclamar como uma obra da família socialista, é esta, e queria começar por dar os parabéns ao Stefan, que em 2017 conseguiu reunir grande parte dos líderes europeus em Gotemburgo para fazermos a proclamação dos 20 princípios deste pilar social. Estamos a dar agora mais um passo em frente e muitos passos em frente às sociedades, designadamente na próxima presidência sueca, que será, creio que em 2022 ou 2023.
That's an interesting point, that Gothenburg in Sweden, how does it feel to get from Gothenburg to Porto? As far as this goes, the social...
It feels great. And I'm very glad that you, Antonio, took this torch and you took it from Gothenburg to Porto. And by doing so, you made it stronger. The pillars are stronger with this action. And this action plan that we're now deciding upon and acting of is making this stronger. And as I said, when we took the decision in Gothenburg, we had one kind of situation, and we still felt the effects of the financial crisis. Actually, we did that. And we saw that people were mistrusting politics in general. And we said, we need to show that this is for the people. This cooperation is basically for the people. So with these principles, we could, as I said earlier, we could advance that. But what you're doing now, Antonio, with this is that you're taking it a step further. You're making it stronger. And of course, during our presidency, we have an election 2022. We're going to win for the third time. And during that presidency, we can advance this even further, because now, given this crisis, what we need to do now with the recovery, building back better, all this must include a social dimension, because otherwise people won't be there. And now we need. I just want to tell you one thing more. I had a meeting with the committee in the Parliament yesterday, because we always need that before we go to European councils. And I can tell you that the Conservatives were very, very irritated. And they said, look what you've done, you're destroying Europe with this social pillar. Are you proud? And I said, yes, I'm very proud. Because this is exactly what Europe needs now. So, and our family, I think we should be proud of what we're doing, because it's our values, it's our way of thinking, and putting people first and in the middle. That's the result that we have. But this is social democratic and socialist values that we are developing into a strategy for people.
Madame la maire, Anne, si je pourrais me permettre de vous demander, quel serait votre message à Stéphane, à Antonio, aux autres chefs d'État, demain, pour vous aider à réussir à ce que vous voulez faire dans votre ville et les autres maires dans les villes, les grandes villes de l'Europe. Comment faciliter votre travail avec ce qu'on va faire demain?
D'abord, je pense que l'Europe a posé vraiment une vision nouvelle qui fait du bien, et pour répondre notamment à cette pandémie. Mais on voit aussi que l'Europe, si elle n'est pas plus agile, plus rapide dans l'exécution de ses politiques, si les citoyens ne voient pas plus rapidement ce que l'Europe a poussé avec, bien sûr, les chefs de gouvernement, on risque de perdre du temps, on risque de passer à côté d'un moment dans lequel il faut s'engager totalement pour mener ensemble à la fois toutes les politiques de changement climatique, tout l'accompagnement des travailleurs dont les emplois vont être impactés négativement par le changement climatique. C'est clair que aller vers des énergies renouvelables, sortir des énergies fossiles, il va falloir accompagner des travailleurs qui sont ceux des énergies, qui travaillent aujourd'hui dans les énergies fossiles. Il va falloir aussi aller très très rapidement soutenir, j'y reviens, la classe moyenne partout dans nos pays. Parce que ce qu'on constate, c'est que la classe moyenne est fragilisée. Lorsque la classe moyenne se dit qu'elle prend tous les efforts en termes d'impôts, en termes de difficultés de vivre, en termes d'incertitude pour l'éducation de ses enfants, la classe moyenne doute. C'est ce qui arrive dans beaucoup de pays européens et dans les pays de l'OCDE. Et quand la classe moyenne doute, ce sont aussi nos institutions et nos systèmes démocratiques qui se fragilisent. Moi, j'attends de l'Europe que l'on ait une politique très très active qui aille aussi s'appuyer sur les acteurs locaux, sur le dialogue social, syndicats et entrepreneurs, renouer de ce fait avec la grande tradition de l'Europe sociale de Jacques Delors, et je crois que c'est ce qu'est en train de faire Antonio Costa, mais il faut aussi aller au niveau des villes, qu'il puisse y avoir un lien direct sur un certain nombre de programmes, le Green Deal par exemple, entre le niveau européen, la Commission et les villes, qui sont des acteurs plus agiles, plus rapides, plus flexibles que les États et que même le niveau européen. Il faut le prendre comme une donnée très pragmatique et s'appuyer là-dessus. Moi, ce que j'appelle dans ce mouvement de l'Europe, j'appelle un Big Bang territorial, que l'Europe considère qu'elle est là aussi pour accompagner ces formes de coopération entre le niveau européen, le niveau national, le niveau local et bien sûr le monde économique et les syndicats. Je pense qu'il faut vraiment faire ce Big Bang de la proximité que l'Europe doit faire aussi, parce que ça sera une condition de plus grande rapidité, plus grande efficacité dans les politiques très très audacieuses qui sont aujourd'hui posées au niveau européen.
Un Big Bang de la proximité, I like that as a hashtag. EU Social Summit 21 and hashtag social rights. I think we need to wrap this up, Irache. I think this was quite a productive discussion from the grassroots, from the people on the front line and policymakers, sending a strong message to the leaders tomorrow.
Of course. Muy rápidamente me vais a permitir que antes de finalizar el evento haga un agradecimiento a todas las personas que habéis hecho posible que hoy hayamos tenido este encuentro, a los staff del PES y del grupo S&D, por supuesto a todos los ponentes que habéis participado, al PES, que como organización política que aglutina a la socialdemocracia está poniendo un empeño muy importante en esta materia, y por supuesto a nuestro querido primer ministro Antonio, que sin él no hubiera sido posible el estar hoy aquí. Anne, Stefan, está claramente el estar hoy aquí los socialdemócratas no es una casualidad. Que hoy estemos aquí la socialdemocracia debatiendo antes que el evento formal del Consejo con la ciudadanía, con los sindicatos, con la sociedad civil, es el claro mensaje de compromiso de la socialdemocracia europea, de seguir construyendo con la ciudadanía la Europa que queremos, más y mejor Europa, pero una Europa que responda a lo que la ciudadanía está esperando de nosotros y de nosotras, porque estamos aquí para mejorar la vida de las personas. Hemos esforzado mucho, hemos volcado mucho tiempo en avanzar en el ámbito económico y tenemos ahora un gran reto, que es conseguir que todos estos avances se consoliden de una forma justa. Tenemos grandes retos, la transición ecológica, la transición digital, pero debemos de hacerlo, abordarlo con una transición justa, no dejando a nadie atrás, no dejando que al final sean los más vulnerables los que tengan que pagar la factura de esta transición en la que estamos obligados a hacer, porque ya no es una opción, es una obligación, la lucha contra el cambio climático y la digitalización, pero con ese rostro social que solo la democracia puede hacerlo, liderando las políticas sociales, reforzando el sistema de bienestar social y también avanzando en una Europa más igual entre hombres y mujeres. Por eso, será la socialdemocracia o nadie lo hará quienes defendamos esa Europa verde, esa Europa justa y esa Europa feminista. Tenemos una gran tarea. Hoy ponemos un paso más adelante sobre el camino al que construir y quiero invitaros a todas y a todos a que sigáis contribuyendo con vuestras ideas, con vuestros debates, con vuestras propuestas, porque este es un camino que vamos a construir de forma conjunta, la socialdemocracia con la ciudadanía, porque están esperando de nosotros lo que es nuestra responsabilidad. Muchas gracias.
Irache, muchas gracias. A final word from Sergei Stanishev, that I guess, as David Sassoli, the President of Parliament, was saying earlier, he'd like to see a new beginning, that tomorrow could be a new beginning. What would you like to see tomorrow? How do you sum up what we talked about today, connecting those dots, like Irache said, of the digital aspect, of the green transition, of gender equality? There are so many dots to connect tomorrow.
There are indeed, but you know, the most important conclusion which I make for myself, listening to the whole debate, is that all these women and men, they didn't shy away from difficult decisions. Because I'm quite confident that for Stefan, life would be easier if back in 2007, he would not raise the issue of a social summit in Gothenburg. But he did it. I'm sure also that for Antonio, it was a big challenge, political, diplomatic, to go ahead in the Portuguese presidency with this proposal. I know for sure that without the group, we wouldn't have the action plan from the Commission, because it was one of the conditions of the S&D group to support the Commission. We want a social action plan based on the 20 principles. I'm confident that for our mayors of big cities, smaller cities like Anne Hidalgo, it is vital to have social Europe, because we socialists created the welfare state in our homes, in our national states. And we are seeing the deficits in Europe. We are seeing inequalities rising. We are seeing that people are not sure about their future. They want economic protection. And what we are trying to do, and we are doing together with all the efforts, with all the stakeholders in the family, is step by step, methodically coming back to social Europe. So for tomorrow, I'm very optimistic, but we have to be cautious, because you know, when you climb a mountain, the last dozens of meters are the most dangerous. So we don't have to sleep. We have to reach the peak and open a new chapter. After Gothenburg, the chapter of Porto, and then move ahead, forward and forward, achieving more social Europe and bringing back hope to the citizens. That's about it.
Sergei, thank you very much. Thank you also to Anne and Stefan, Antonio, Irache, thank you. And thank you to all of those who participated tonight, and all of you who also listened in and sent in your questions. It's been a very inspiring evening, and I think that will hopefully, that energy will transfer tomorrow at the beginning of the Porto Summit on the social pillar. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Muchas gracias.